when the leg is attached, this goes right over the spine. Okay? In other words, it hugs the pelvis at the top. There's a ridge up on the back. And the gid comes out of the end of the pelvis, the end of the spine, goes through the pelvis. All this was covered with chelev, fat, etc. And at this point over here, once we've removed it from the pelvis, the gid no longer has any chelev on it. Okay? There might be a tiny, tiny bit over here, just a tiny, tiny bit at the very end of it. But this is where literal Shuman Hagid begins. Before I open this up, where does the gid itself go? Forget the Shuman.
It doesn't go over? Goes to the head, the head of the femur, and like wrap around over there, like through this. Oh, it goes that way. Oh, okay. Got it.
The hamstring. Ever heard of an athlete? Someone getting hamstring?
Yes, mentioned many times.
The hamstring is the sciatic nerve. It's that long, rubbery, annoying string in the middle of the ham. Right? Hamon in Spanish, jambon in French. Jambe in French is a leg. It's the leg string. It's that simple. This is what's inside a ham that wasn't open to have the gid removed. There are butchers in the Goyish world, to this day, who remove the hamstring before they make a prosciutto type product.
Why?
It doesn't adhere quite as well, but it leaves a cleaner product without rubbery nibs and bits in it. So you have to eat around or chew off. Okay? In northern Italy, the tradition tended more towards making ham out of larger pigs and separating the muscles rather than using the entire leg of a smaller pig. But you can't do this with a pig bigger than a year old. The silver skin's going to get too dry and too hard. They don't bother with it. It's all baby piglets. Now, this muscle over here is Sartorius. By us, it's obviously elongated. We have much longer thighs. Sartorius, it doesn't schlep very much on its own. It makes a reasonably tasty steak, especially on beef. This is where the falda came up, right? There's a rubbery membrane around the abdomen, and it meets here. This is the crotch, and so it would go up over here. It would continue around the other side of the abdomen. You'll sometimes find rubbery bits over here, left over from that rubbery membrane on the falda, on the flank. Okay? So, I'll show you the way Rav Giat taught, which was the apparently Mahfudian method back in the day. But he would basically remove the entire, they call this the plaster, and he uses the Yiddish term for it because they were still doing Niqqur in Israel and selling to Ashkenazim who were used to buying it that way. And so the musculature, the nomenclature, was basically that of...
But the off-white part is
The
called
plaster is the
plaster.
part that goes around the Sartorius?
No, plaster is the Sartorius.
It is the
Mahfoud
Sartorius,
also
okay.
dresses like an Ashkenazi.
Mahfoud?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a story for another time. All right. You're a Sephardi. You want
It's
to
like,
be taken
it's
seriously.
like Rabbi
That's what you have
Schneid.
to do.
Huh?
Rabbi
I don't
Schneid.
think Rabbi Schneid, how he dresses.
One of our Rabbiim. He's a Eloi. He dresses like a Satmar.
Never met him. I'm not going to comment on people I haven't met.
He's a great man.
I haven't read
That's all I can say.
their material.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what you have over here is the femoral artery. You can kind of see that, yeah?
It's not from my angle.
You can see that there's a flat, clear
Yeah.
tube over here. You can see me pushing blood.
Yeah.
Femoral artery runs over here. It branches a bit. This is where it continues. Goes down the back of the leg. You see it right over here. Still see it, right?
Yeah.
You won't see any of this on beef. The fat's too thick. You'll never see it. And it runs down over here. Remember how we've talked about how the arteries are always protected? They're always on the inside of the body, and they're always behind the bones when the animal's facing forwards, that you can see your adversary. Try to avoid getting maimed or mauled. So, there is no gid that runs here. The Teimanim don't do this. But Rav Giat taught me nonetheless because the Sephardim do. And there was apparently, I don't know if it was only in Morocco, if it was North Africa, there were those who wanted to say that they didn't understand the bifurcation of the gid. They basically held that the gid was all one piece, and everything had to go. And since the Mishnah itself never mentions the femoral artery, which is really weird, because the femoral artery is bigger and has more blood in it than the brachial artery does in the arms. So they wanted to say, obviously it should be asur. It's one of the biggest arteries in the body. Must be that was the gid hachitzon samuch labasar that was referred to in when the Gemara tells you there's a difference between gid pinim and gid chitzon, that both of them are forbidden. So I said the gid, for all of its branches, anyway, there's not one gid pnimi, gid chitzon. Even they further bifurcate. You'll see that when I get down to the lower leg. So there was a tradition that said, obviously, all that's asur. This must be the gid chitzon. So the custom had been by the Sephardim to remove this. And I saw some older Moroccan gentlemen who said that in Morocco they just threw it out, but not everybody held that way. And I think that was after the Rabbanim started to peel out. They just told the butchers to take everything out and go Ashkenazi. So this would be, now you could just cut the whole thing and take it off. I'd rather leave it on. I mean, the way he taught me, he would take it off, but he would also just,
What about today in
he
Morocco?
wouldn't even salt it. It was so small, huh?
There's still a Jewish community in Morocco today, though, no?
Yeah, big one.
So they would
Yeah,
have.
they import.
They're culturally French
Ah,
and
Okay.
kashrus-wise Chabad.
okay.
That's all you got there. Little piece of the tendon at the head of the tenderloin. So it's made, you're going to leave it. Can you all feel over here with your thumb? Go ahead and get this dirty because it's David and Chaim's.
Thank you.
Hold on, let me.
I would never.
Nice look.
Right.
I had to get it too.
Body cavity
Can I
search.
borrow that?
That bone?
Can you feel the femur over here?
Wait, here?
Are you serious?
The same reason why he did it, I did it. I wasn't,
The sweaty part.
it was funny, that's
Not the
why.
outside.
All right, what am I feeling, bruv? Just indentation?
A bone.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
Bone.
yeah.
If you're doing it right, you feel a bone.
I feel a bone.
There's a bone here. Can you feel it?
No, wait.
Well, I pointed here.
Okay.
You're going straight. You feel meat.
Here. Now I feel it here.
Okay?
I can't see.
Well, you can see the head of the femur over here.
Okay. That makes sense, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you, Max. The head of the femur is over here. It always helps to get that letter of approbation from someone.
Wait, are you sure?
Makes sense. No joke. Maaseh Shaya Kach, I heard this. I was in my office. A cameraman of mine calls me from Israel,
It's a knife.
and he has this question about this very complicated situation where a woman and her family is divorced, marrying a Kohen. Terrible catastrophe. The whole family's chilonim. Nobody cares.
Kohen marrying a who?
Divorce.
A divorcee?
Grusha marrying a Kohen.
It's the
Okay.
problem.
Did they
So he calls me
nullify?
up. He asks, "What should I do? I'm so this. I shouldn't go. I should protest." Huh?
Or the other way around,
A Grusha marrying a Kohen?
calling marrying Grusha.
Or a Kohen? Okay, fine. So it's the whole thing. So today he's very upset. We go back and forth. A long conversation last week, and then he called me back to follow up. And I said, "Listen, nobody cares what you think. You can protest and not show up. Your whole family hates you anyway. Or you can try to be friendly and maybe they'll order kosher food for the wedding because you're there, and some good things might potentially come from it. And I'm not pasking for you, but I wonder how much good you'll do by protesting and not going at all." Anyway, while we're talking, he says to me, "You think I should call Rav Shmuel Eliyahu? I was like, "Yeah, I think you should waste my time and then tell me that you want someone, better known with broader halachic shoulders. Like, so just call him out. Why are you wasting my time? Why don't you just call him directly if that's what you want to do anyway?" So, agav, getting approbation from other people. Like, if you're going to call someone else, no. If you're here and you're telling me that what I'm doing is great, I mean, that's fantastic. Thanks. Anyway, this is the quadriceps. The quadriceps hugs the bone from the front, just like your quadriceps does. The muscle's over here in front of the femur. And as we all know, and we all should know by now, and I'm not going to ask you and embarrass you because I assume none of you do know this yet because you're not listening. But muscles only contract. They don't know how to do anything else. So all this muscle can do, because muscles can only attach two muscles to each other, a muscle to bone, or two bones, what would they do? They would pull. What would the quadriceps do? How do you flex your quadriceps?
Pull up your leg.
Right? By straightening your leg. It can straighten your leg to the point that it bends and basically straightens out such that your tibia is parallel to your femur and in a straight line. You align your leg, you can straighten your leg forward with this muscle. When you're walking, you have to bend it the other way in order to get traction and cover ground. I can't relate. The bone right here is where the quadriceps thins out and it hugs just behind the femur and no more. At which point you have the hip adductor and you have the rest of the thigh. Okay, so I'm going to. You hear me?
Tapping on the bone.
I can open up a little bit more so you get a better picture of this.
You're tapping to sense the bone?
Well, I know where the bone is. I'm typing to show you. Hear that?
Yes.
Okay? So you can feel the bone. You can gently trace down along the back of the bone. If you do it right and you actually hug the bone with your blade, you're going to leave a nice white bleached clean bone and not going to leave any meat on it. There's a bit of a ridge in the back of the femur, so don't be upset, your knife is going to jump. What I'm doing now, you see that? I went right down to the seam.
Yes.
You see how I'm not cutting anymore?
Yes.
Because once I've passed the bone and I've gotten to the seam, I would just stab through a very large muscle and that would look really bad.
Can I feel it real quick?
Okay, so here's the bone over here. I cut down through this meat because there is no other way. I generally don't want to see exposed muscle meat. I'd rather see silver skin or fat or seam.
Yes.
But there are parts where the muscle hugs the bone. At the end of the day, it's not Lego. It doesn't fall apart so easily.
So wait.
So I cut through this, okay? I'm retracing my steps. Get used to doing this. I opened up the plaster over here, and this is at a pretty sharp, like a 30-degree angle. Opened, open, open, open. I removed the exposed part of the femoral artery. And I can remove more, but that's not the point right now.
Well, how much of the femoral artery?
Once you nicked it,
done.
you've done it. Okay? And there's no chelev over here. This potentially hugs the bottom of what was a tenderloin, but at that point, even the tenderloin is basically only shuman agid because the abdomen ended here. So if I'd cut the tenderloin off over here, there'd be no more chelev from that point on. Here, yes. But this is south of the waist. Over here is where I have chelev. So this comes up over here. Just be careful, make sure there's a nice red seam exposed over here so that none of the fat... I didn't mean to take this apart, is what I'm saying. I'll do it faster and more thoroughly on the second leg. At this point, the panoramic view is what's more paramount.
And you know where to stop just by feeling like where the bone stops getting. I mean, where it's not,
Well-
it's not hard anymore. So you stop the knife.
Again, what you don't see is that my left arm is doing more work than my right arm, because as I open up the Sartorius muscle, the French call it meron because it's a fish that looks just like that, has like a fish tail. It's a long, skinny fish with a short tail like that. So you open up over here, you can fold this over and remove the seam we don't care about. That's subcutaneous fat. There's no isur there. And here I basically cleaned the whole bone-facing part of it. That's just the seam. And as I open this up, okay, I expose the femur itself. And you can feel it. So I go behind the femur with my knife perfectly upright. Max, you gotta look at those knife angles.
Yes.
Knife is perfectly upright. I can start with the tip of my blade opening up. And as I do, and I'm starting to pull away, you're going to see it pop a little bit when you expose the seam. The seams always have fat. There's always silver skin and fat in those seams. And as soon as it pops away, there's no reason to keep on going because you've already opened it up. You're going to have to continue up here. And at this point, I probably will cut the gid. I don't care, but I probably will. And now I'm very delicately just showing you what this looks like when you butterfly and open it out. That's the gid. Okay?
There we go. Goes through there.
Oh, can you pull it? I'll loosen this from here.
I'm sorry. So I gotta not do that.
I'm trying to take the muscle meat off. It's a little bit bleached because we sanitized it. Pull, 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 pull. Okay.
Now, just to back up, where is the tefach d'oraisa? Just to review and clarify.
What hugs the head of the femur? Which would be this part?
No.
כף הירך. וכן לא יוכלו בעצם גיד הנשה, אשר על כף הירך, it seems that what Rabbi Yehuda is talking about is that part of the gid that's on kaf hayarech. You could have just said gid hanasheh, and I would have understood the entirety of it as asur midoraita. Even that's not true.
So
Kedet fisa over here. Meaning this is the part that's over kaf hayarech, and even then it's only gid pinimi. See, again, how could gid pinimi or gid chitzon have different halachic stati if they're parallel to each other? So it must be that only part of the gid pinimi is asur deoraita, and it's only that kedei tefisa. The rest of the gid chitzon and the rest of everything else is only the rabbanan. You follow? Up here, there's no distinction between the two. And if kedei tefisa, what the malach did was basically he, grabbed, if literally or figuratively, grabbed with his hand. So assuming the malach was a human being, which is probably what it is, we're talking about something along these lines. But if it's before the bifurcation, it makes no sense. And so, asher al kafei orech, that's the part where there's a pnimi nechitzon. That's the part where a tefach of this one is doraita, a
Where?
tefach of that one is only
Where's the
dorabanan.
bifurcation?
I'll show you that a little bit more clearly. And I'm being delicate here. I told you I like to keep things intact. You get a much better view
Yes.
and a much better understanding of what's going on. But in order to serve our purposes here, I'm going to have to open this up a little bit more. Now, when you come down over here, and again, I want you to know that Rav Yat didn't teach me all these things. He would just tell you to cut open. But if you want to keep the meat looking pretty, then you're opening up. This is the calf muscle, gastrocnemius, and that's one of the big mistakes that Weisfeld made.
Wait, what did you do?
Okay, Chaim, you're recording this.
Yes.
I mean, no disrespect to the man, but it was a mistake.
Yeah.
In fact, I do have to say it even on the recording. Him having done that in Bichlal and letting it go out of his hand, if he himself weren't Baki, was a terrible thing. So again, at worst, what he did was midrabanan. I'm not going to attack the man for doing it, but for promoting himself or presenting himself as someone who's Baki in this and letting for a takalat to come out of his hands. Okay, it was only the Rabbanan, but
Still.
Sfardim, speaking in those terms, much more loosely than Ashkenazim do. Ashkenazim tend to blur the difference between Doraita and Rabbanan. Very few yeshivas actually teach this stuff. But that's something that I have to take him to task over, and I did. That was my responsibility, and I'm glad we spoke, and he never followed up after that last email I showed you. Or read to you. Oh, so what am I doing?
Bifurcation.
You've noticed we've migrated here, right? But the gid you saw where it started.
Yes.
And it's all under tension, obviously. The whole thing is under tension when the animal's alive. You have to stretch your legs, right?
That's right.
Part of what you're stretching. So, we're opening up. We hit that seam before. I knifed just a little bit the connective. It's like skinning. When you're skinning, you're never cutting the skin. You're just cutting the very tiny little
right.
ligaments that hold it in place. Chaim, you're blocking the light here? Why don't you guys push those beef carts?
Could we get? Where
I mean, they're on rails, right? They move.
No, but where could we?
How about not where we don't want them to be?
Where do we not? Where do we want them to be?
Well,
That's
the
the
light's
question.
over there, Elbaz, and I'm standing here.
What I'm saying is, at what point will it interfere with the work they're trying to do back
If
there?
it interferes with the work, we'll move it again.
So we're not- So where's the bifurcation?
Now, we can see what we're doing, right? So I'm cutting here towards the meat itself, okay? Here is the gid. I'm loosening it from these attachments very gently, and
That's the top round,
it's a
right?
very sharp knife. That's the top round. Okay? We talk about knokonot. We talk about little bits and pieces of gid that run parallel to just above the surface of the muscle. Do they actually dive into the muscles? Well, that's apparently a discussion we'll
This
have
is
to
a
have.
kinoknot.
This might it might actually just be it's a branch of the gid that got detached. Or I didn't mean to detach that, but it was in the shade. I
Okay.
couldn't see that side. Don't do this in the dark. Can you appreciate the bifurcation? Can I help you appreciate the bifurcation?
do.
Okay. Can pull it apart. Okay, one's pinimi, one's chitzon. Which one's pinimi?
Closer to the bone.
Samuch la'etzem, closer to the bone. Which one's chitzon? Samuch la'basar. Where's the basar? Basar is here. So it's further from the bone, but towards the meat, or further from the meat, closer
This
to
is
the bone.
the chitzon.
This is a
Couldn't see
chitzon.
from
This
the
is a
from the
pinimi.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the chitzon. This is the pinimi.
Chitzon.
Okay. Sether? Nobody cares. It's all coming out. I'm just showing you so that you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, there's very little by way of consequence. Now.
But there were
The soft
attached.
seams here, I'm not saying you can get very far with blunt dissection, but to the extent that you can, it'll prevent you from scoring the meat, which you don't want to do.
Blunt means pulling on it a little.
Blunt means without using a sharp object like a knife. This is not going to be open with blunt dissection. That's semimembranosus and semitendinosus, and they both have to be separated with a little bit of force. That's the eye round and the bottom round.
I think you cut yourself. I know.
I cut myself.
What's
This is a sharp knife. After all, you don't even feel it when it cuts.
maybe you didn't. I don't know what you did.
Where's that cow blood?
That's my blood.
Or sheep blood?
Maybe it's not. I don't know. I figured it all blood would be you.
Hopefully it's not yours.
You ever catch me cutting myself? Let me know.
Okay. I guess you didn't.
Well, if it's sharp enough knife, you wouldn't even notice.
There was an artery there.
I was not. Yeah.
Right, the aorta. And the femoral.
Okay.
Right.
We talk about knokenot. We want these surface branches coming out. This is what we mean. Sephardim,
Surface branches
Temanim.
of the good.
Yeah, this is just fat. It's hard to see now. These are knokenot. See this?
Yes.
They have the same, they're nerves, they have the same makeup as nerves. As far as the Sephardim are concerned, what do we do with these? We take them off. Why do we not chase them into the meat? Albert, you want to take a stab at this?
Sure, because we don't even chase chalev into the meat because it's.
What's the status of chelev?
Deoraita.
What's the isur of chelev? What's the punishment?
Charet.
Correct. Does it get any worse than isur chelev? No. And when do we stop chasing chelev?
And it goes into the meat.
It goes into the meat. Gid chitzon, or for that matter, pinimi. What's the status of gid pinimi? Asur, gid pinimi.
Well, after tefach, you just a minute
Fine,
ago, after
but
tefach, tefach.
on the whole, at least this part of
Fine,
gid,
fine.
over the thigh,
Deoraita.
Kidder
gid pinimi. Deoraita,
Oh.
gid chitzon, dorabanan.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
knokenot themselves are only midorabanan because they're neither gid pinimi nor gid chitzon.
Okay.
If we're talking about the main bifurcation, which is mentioned in the Gemara. Why, for something that's ultimately midrabanan, would we go into the muscle meat itself when we don't even do that for chelev? It's that simple. Mike Babayev? 10 o'clock. I don't know. You want to... my voicemail is full and I like it that way. So let's...
So is this a tendon right there? Is that part
Fat.
of it? Fat, okay.
It's fat.
He
Okay?
wants us to ship out this week, I'm telling you.
No, but he said he wanted 30 to 45 days.
This whole line
He
is
said he
fat?
wanted...
It's my papa.
We'll get 3-4 calls a week for the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, but
When we say Shuman Hagid, okay, let's just go through these Weisfeld principles. First of all, and I'm sorry, Chaim, if that makes you uncomfortable, but this,
No, I have
the
no-
discussion has to happen.
No, 100%. I brought it up to you for a reason because I felt uncomfortable with what Rabbi Leahy was saying. It just made no
Right,
sense.
Right. And I didn't want to tell you guys at the outset, I do have a great respect for Leahy. There are a number of things that he said and, demonstrated over the years that indicated that he wasn't so clear on certain things. So just, it's important to know. I'm sure Belsky was a great man. This was not his forte. And I'm sorry to be the one who has to point it out. I have nothing against him or anyone else. I don't know where he learned and what he was told by whoever taught him. And it could be that he was taught from someone who told him authoritatively, this is the end-all, be-all of Ashkenazi tradition. I can't comment beyond that. I could just tell you that if what Weisfeld is telling me in Rebelsky's name is accurate, and I can't even state that. But if that's what he's claiming to tell me in Rebelsky's name, then that's an inaccuracy that goes back to Rebelsky. If Weisfeld doesn't know what he's talking about, I never met him, then maybe Rebelsky's not at fault. But all I can comment on is what was told to me in his name by someone I've never met. So let's hedge our bets over here, okay? When we talk knokenot, we're talking about something that's not anything worse than the Rabbanan at its very worst. And if the knokenot dive into the meat, all of the Sephardim, you're talking about from Morocco to Afghanistan, later India, as far north as the Caucasus Mountains in Uzbekistan, it didn't cross anybody's mind that there'd be a good reason to chase the knokenot into the meat, because we don't do that for chelev. In fact, were it not for that, we wouldn't eat anything ever. We'd all be OCD about this. We don't do that. We don't go into the meat to take out chelev. Why would we do it? To take out something that is literally 2 or 3 steps below that in terms of severity.
But you're already into the meat. Meaning it's like this. You already cut right into it to dive in.
So, it's very clear by Gidan Hashem. It's not quite as clear by the chelev. The status of the seams. When we say, for example, the Rambam explains this concept of the hikui basar. It's covered by meat. What did we say by the kiva? By the meses and the betos?
the
creases.
If it's in the creases, according to which tradition?
According to the
Temanim in Germans, the Beit Rishon tradition. If it's in the creases, it's considered
Mutar.
hikui basar because it's covered by meat.
Yes.
It's not to say that you have to tear meat in order to get it, but you have to separate.
Yes.
You have to open a seam. To get the Gidan Hashem out, you are going to open seams. This is clear to everybody. There's no way this thing is coming out without opening the seams, right?
Yes.
Fine. How far into the seams you need to go is going to be an interesting question. Another good example of this is the tenderloin. We're not doing loins today. We'll do them. We're going to do all this stuff. Don't worry. The next time we do loins, and now you understand where the tenderloin is, and where it starts, and where it ends, and where the loin attaches. So I'll get into more nuanced detail. There's the psoas major muscle, which is the tendon limb. Psoas minor is the chine muscle that literally hugs the spine on the ventral belly-facing side of it. And there's a seam in between the two. The temanim don't open it up.
Okay.
Because just like the fat on the meses and betachosot, which is deoraita, and it is karet, and they don't remove it when it gets to the seams, even though you can open the seam and remove it without cutting the actual stomach itself. Here you're talking about two muscles with a membrane above them, and once you open that membrane, David,
Yes.
you dump something into there?
There's water.
Okay, fine, just, I couldn't tell if you dumped something in or pulled something out. So, just as with the meses and betachosot, when you open the seam in order to get it to fat inside, you've already gone beyond what the Germans and the Temanim would require you to do, because there is flesh covering it, and according to both of those traditions, that never had anything to do with each other, never spoke to each other, according to both of those traditions, there's no reason to open folds or to open seams. Psoas major is here, Psoas minor is here, and there's a fatty seam in between. The Temanim will tell you there's no reason to open that fatty seam. The Sephardim would say, fine, our custom is to open it, maybe l'shem kumrah. You can open it up, you can scrape out the fat that's there, whatever else is covered by meat you're fine with, but we definitely need to open seams in order to get it to Gidan Hashem. To be clear, no one here gets out alive. The seams need to be open. Getting into the actual muscle meat is something that's unanimously rejected by all Sephardim, and for that matter, probably the Germans. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone alive today who can explain that tradition.
What is it like a
Bet
silver
you bottom
skin?
dollar, they weren't doing this stuff.
I told you about
Huh? Well,
the guy who did lots of research.
Do it, find it, I'd love to
Bro,
see
what
it.
is it? Is that like silver skin or it's more like a fat?
Fat.
And that's considered
How can you
Shuman Hagid?
distinguish it?
Well, what we call Shuman Hagid is basically the fat that
Just
hugs
send me a bunch of videos
any
and
bone-facing surface on any one of these muscles, okay?
Okay.
And the reason that, this is another one of those Weisfeld email comments, the reason that I commented on the head of the femur, you're going to see in a second. So basically, all of the fat facing this side. Now remember, this is a minhag. According to the Rambam, it's midrabbanan. According to everybody else, it's a minhag. I will tell you, and I will testify that I saw with my own two eyes, that Rav Giat was not OCD about the Shuman Hagid. He would remove it. He would remove it quickly. He would remove it very effectively. If a tiny speck here or there happened to have escaped, he wouldn't spend the rest of his life crying about it. Okay? I'm not saying he would just open it up, pull something out, and leave, the way Weisfeld described doing that elk. I'm saying that Rav Giat would open, remove everything reasonable
So it's
and
all of it.
accessible.
It's this. It all looks the
This
same.
is also, yeah, even though you see it faces a seam,
Yeah.
because this was folded over.
Yes.
Right.
We still take it.
Nonetheless, yes.
Oh, it's
this-
even
he
within
would
the
instruct
it's
me to
within the seam
remove.
exactly, right?
It is.
So
it
then we
is,
have to get rid of
but
it?
it's within the seam facing, you
Facing
know,
meat.
facing the gid,
Ah.
really. The gid was right up here. It's
So
folded over.
it's close enough.
Just bear in mind that we butterflied this open, and this was all closed in a much tighter space, kind of like the lungs. You can look at them outside of the rib cage, but to appreciate how tight everything is over there, you have to see them in action. So all this is going to come off. There are 2 points of
Right.
penetration, insertions. One up here and one over here. The Ashkenazim open them up and chase them out. The Sephardim do not. This one happens to have a vein on it. We're not that concerned, and we're going to just, cut and remove. This is flush with the surface of the meat. I'm not taking any more than that off. Okay?
So this fat too would come out, all this, these lines?
Here,
Yeah.
scrape down the silver.
Oh, so this is silver at this point.
Look at it.
I'm saying, oh, up here, this too.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can come out.
So where do you draw the line of where you?
Take it out. Just take it out. When
I
you
mean,
hit
it
when
all
you hit the
looks-
silver skin or when you hit the meat? That's where you stop.
What
I
about
mean, like the area where you start
like
taking off
this
things.
over here and like these little things?
No, this is already flush with the surface.
Okay.
I'm not concerned with it. This is already unique from the subcutaneous
That's
fat.
right.
Not that upset about it. Okay, here we have silver and silver. I'm fine. This is the inside of what they call the silver side. Now, my knife is sharp. Nitpicking is expensive and costly, and this can be done very quickly. So I'm doing this slowly for the purposes of demonstration. Here was an otherwise felt comment. Okay, I'm going to try and leave that as is. Now I'll give you a close-up of it. There's a node, a lymph node over here. You'll find them very common in big masses of
Is this one
muscle.
infected?
No,
No.
no, that's how they look. And they are a little bit nasty looking. Look like brown snot. Okay.
'Cause I know if it's not green, then it's technically infected, right?
Generally speaking, it's indicative of some kind of infection. This you can seam blunt dissection. Learn to love that term. Okay. Anything else facing the interior? Remember, as long as you know where it comes from and what it faces, you know that it should be basically clean. The Timani removed all these things too, so it's not like there's that much wiggle room, so to speak. All right, what you want to see is red meat or a silver skin. Now, over here, blunt dissection. Watch out. This up here is going to be the seam between what could be Chelev Deoraita and what is definitely Shuman Agid, and I want it out anyway. No good reason to keep it, it does nothing for you. Not only that, but from a purely aesthetic butchery perspective, no one wants to see a fat cap that's an inch thick.
Yeah.
It's offensive. And if nothing else, you can at least bevel it, like they do with the edges of really thick glasses. It makes it look a little bit less unappealing. No offense to any of us who have really thick glasses, but there's a reason they do that. They used to call Coke bottle glasses when my dad was growing up. It's like you're looking at somebody through the bottom of a Coke bottle.
Yeah.
This over here is all coming off. This over here is obviously coming off. Okay. This over here is the reason that the Ashkenazim refer to the rump as the shetel.
Why?
Because gluteus medius has a strip of tendon running down the middle of it, and then the grain of the muscle is like V-shaped.
It looks kind of like a shape.
Two muscles that are attached to the tendons. It looks like a parted hair.
I like it.
They're very
It is
creative.
what it is, but it's good to know. Every culture had these names they came up with for these things. There's reasons for it. So I'm going to open this up a little bit more and get at a couple other things. But femoral artery.
I never understood shadles. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, I think I've offended enough people today
wanna
that I
know
can
about
defer that argument for another time.
Ask Robert Reifman, he'll tell you the whole history of it.
Yes, how it's like even more sanua and even more.
When Rav Moshe Feinstein and his wife came over,
No, I think the Sephardi
different-
Chacham
yeah.
said you couldn't do it, right? Pretty sure. No, never mind.
at one point all the Hasidim weren't doing it, and they said if you do it, to hell with you.
The Sephardim
And then,
almost unequivocally rejected the whole concept, but
right,
even what's mentioned in the Gemara, because it's there, it's in the Talmud.
fascinating
Let's talk about it.
history, really.
They were using horse hair. They were using things. They weren't buying hair from